In a quiet town nestled at the edge of the prairie, Samuel Crawford was known for two things: his wealth and his love for a good challenge. As the owner of one of the largest ranches in the area, he had built an empire on cattle and land. His family had worked hard for generations, and Sam had taken everything they had and made it bigger. But despite all his success, Sam craved something more, a new thrill. Something that could make his heart race in ways money and land never could. And in a small town like theirs, where everyone knew everyone else's business, it wasn't long before that thrill found him in the form of a bet. It all started on a warm summer evening, with the sun setting over the dry grasslands, turning the sky into a canvas of oranges and pinks. Sam was at his usual spot, the local saloon where he gathered with his friends after a long day of work. It was a place where men like him, who had the means to enjoy life, went to relax, boast about their latest business moves, and talk about anything and everything. The old wooden bar creaked under the weight of the crowd, and the sound of glasses clinking and laughter filled the room. Sam was in the middle of telling a story about his most recent cattle deal when one of his friends, Charlie McGrath, leaned in with a glint in his eye. "Sam," Charlie said, his voice a little lower than usual, "I've got a bet for you." Sam turned to him, intrigued. Charlie wasn't one for light wagers. He liked a challenge. And when he offered one, it was always something that stirred the pot. "What's the bet, Charlie?" Sam asked, setting down his glass, his curiosity piqued. Charlie leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the edge of his glass. "It's about Clara Mulligan, the widow who lives out on the old farm just past the river. You know her, right?" Sam raised an eyebrow. Clara Mulligan was a figure of interest in the town. A widow for several years now, Clara had lived alone on her farm, far from the main roads. People didn't know much about her, except that she was tall, very tall, and a bit of a mystery. She kept to herself, and the few times she came into town, she was always quiet and reserved. Some people said she had a fierce personality, while others thought she was just a lonely woman who had never quite adjusted to life without her husband. Sam had never spoken to her much, but he had seen her around. He had heard rumors, too. Charlie continued, "I bet you $1,000 that you can't get her to sleep with you. Not that I think she'd go for it, but I'll put my money where my mouth is." Sam laughed, a deep chuckle that echoed through the bar. A challenge like this was right up his alley. Sam had always prided himself on his ability to charm women. It wasn't that he was particularly handsome, though some would say he was, but rather that he had an air of confidence that people, especially women, found hard to resist. He had never met a woman who could say no to him, and he wasn't about to start with Clara Mulligan. "You're on, Charlie," Sam said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "I'll have her eating out of my hand in no time." The rest of the group at the table erupted in laughter and applause. Sam's reputation for winning bets and charming women was well known, and now he had a new target. But beneath the laughter and the jokes, there was something in Sam's chest that fluttered, something he couldn't quite place. He pushed it down, not wanting to admit that he felt a bit uneasy about the whole thing. After all, he wasn't about to fall for some mysterious widow, was he? No. This was just a game. A fun, harmless game. But as Sam lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of his grand, empty home, his thoughts kept drifting back to Clara. What was she really like? He had heard rumors about her strength, how she could lift things that most men couldn't, and about her quiet, almost intimidating presence. There was something about her that intrigued him. She wasn't like the women Sam usually dealt with. They were all predictable, easy to charm with a few kind words or a generous gift. Clara, on the other hand, was different. There was a mystery about her that he couldn't ignore, and that only made her more interesting. Still, he had made the bet, and he wasn't about to back out now. Sam was known for his ability to get what he wanted, and he had no intention of letting a woman or anyone stand in the way of that. The next morning, Sam rode out to the Mulligan farm. The ride was long, and as he made his way down the dusty trail, he couldn't help but think about what he was doing. His horse's hooves clopped steadily on the dirt road, the only sound breaking the silence of the open land. Sam didn't like the idea of playing games with people's emotions, but there was no turning back now. The bet was made, and he had to win. That was the way things worked. Winning was everything. When Sam finally arrived at Clara's farm, he was greeted by the sight of her standing outside, tall and strong, her hands resting on her hips as she looked out over her land. The sun had risen high, casting a golden light over the fields, and Clara seemed almost a part of the landscape, fierce, yet beautiful in her own way. She turned to face him as he approached, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Clara's gaze was steady, unwavering, and Sam felt a flicker of something respect maybe pass between them. "I didn't expect you to come out this way," Clara said, her voice low but clear. "Most people avoid me out here." Sam, caught off guard by her directness, quickly regained his composure. "I've got business with you," he said, trying to sound casual. "I thought we could talk about some of the land deals in the area. Thought I'd make you an offer." Clara gave him a curious look but didn't say anything. Instead, she stepped aside and motioned for him to follow her inside the small house. The interior was simple, with rough-hewn wooden beams supporting the ceiling and a large stone fireplace taking up one wall. The place had a warm, earthy feel, but it was clear that Clara lived a life of hard work, not luxury. As they sat down at the table, Sam began talking about land deals, though his mind kept wandering back to the bet. He couldn't help but notice how calm Clara was. There was no tension in her posture, no sign of nervousness. She wasn't playing games or trying to impress him, she was just herself. That was something Sam wasn't used to. Most people, especially women, put on an act for him. But Clara was different. They spent hours talking about land, about farming, and about life in general. Sam was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. There was a quiet strength in her that he hadn't expected. She listened carefully to everything he said, responding with wisdom that came from years of experience. It was a side of her that most people never got to see. And Sam began to realize that Clara was much more than the rumors had suggested. By the time Sam left, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground. Clara had been kind, respectful, and honest. But there was still a part of Sam that felt like he had failed the bet. He hadn't even gotten close to the flirtatious banter he had planned. And now, as he made his way back to town, he found himself wondering if winning this bet was really what he wanted at all. Sam didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. Clara Mulligan was no longer just a challenge or a bet. She was someone he couldn't quite figure out, and that, more than anything, made her more dangerous than any woman he had ever met. Sam Crawford returned to his ranch that evening with a heavy heart, his mind far from the comfortable surroundings of his grand home. The laughter and pride that had filled his chest earlier in the day had been replaced by a quiet uncertainty. He had gone to Clara Mulligan's farm to make a deal, or at least, that's what he had told himself. But it was clear to him now that Clara was not a woman to be easily figured out. Nor was she someone who could be swayed by the usual tricks that worked on everyone else in town. As Sam sat in his study, staring out the window at the sprawling ranch that he had worked so hard to build, he felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The bet was supposed to be a simple game, a challenge between friends. But the more he thought about Clara, the more complicated things became. There was something about her quiet strength, her calm demeanor that unsettled him in a way he had never experienced before. He had been raised to take what he wanted, to fight for his place in the world, and to never back down from a challenge. But Clara wasn't a prize to be won. She wasn't some woman who could be charmed with compliments or bought with gifts. He hadn't expected her to be like this, genuine, with layers that Sam couldn't see through in a single conversation. He had expected to find a woman to conquer, someone who would fall at his feet. But Clara, it seemed, was not someone who could fall easily, and that made her more intriguing than anyone he had met before. Sam spent the following days trying to figure out his next move. He couldn't back out of the bet now. That would make him look weak, and he couldn't afford that. But he also didn't want to just play the same old game of charm and flirtation that he had always relied on. He wanted something real, something meaningful. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he actually knew about Clara Mulligan. On the other hand, Clara seemed content with her life as it was. She went about her days tending to her farm, handling her cattle, and maintaining the land that had been in her family for generations. She wasn't bothered by the people who gossiped about her in town. Nor did she care much for the whispers that followed her wherever she went. Clara had lived through far too much to be affected by the opinions of small-minded people. When her husband passed away, it had left a hole in her heart, but it had also given her a certain strength. She had learned how to stand on her own 2 feet, to keep going even when the world seemed to want to knock her down. She had always kept a distance from the other townsfolk. She didn't need to fit in with them, and she didn't seek their approval. The loneliness she had come to accept after her husband's death was something she had learned to manage. But it had never been easy. Every day, she had to remind herself that her life was still hers to live, and no matter how much others whispered about her or judged her, she knew she could stand strong on her own. The day Sam returned to her farm, Clara was working on repairing the fence along the western pasture. She had always been good with her hands, and fixing things was a task she relished. It gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that despite everything she had been through, she could still make something work with her own 2 hands. When Sam arrived, he felt that familiar flutter in his chest. But this time, it was different. He wasn't sure why he felt so unsure of himself, but the unease gnawed at him. He had never felt like this before, especially not when it came to a woman. He had always been the one in control of the situation, the one who knew how to win the game. But with Clara, he felt like he was the one being played. Clara didn't greet him with the usual pleasantries. She didn't try to impress him with niceties or small talk. Instead, she simply nodded at him from across the fence and went back to her work. Sam stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. He had been prepared for a conversation, perhaps even an attempt to charm her. But Clara wasn't interested in any of that. "Can I help you with that?" Sam asked, finally breaking the silence. Clara looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm sure you could, but I've got it handled. I've been doing this for years." Sam stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry earth. "I'm not saying you can't do it alone. I'm just offering to lend a hand. Clara paused, considering him for a moment. Then, without a word, she handed him a piece of rope. "Tie that end there," she said, pointing to a post. Sam took the rope and tied it as instructed, silently impressed by how efficient she was. They worked in silence for a while, the sound of the rope being pulled and tied filling the air. Sam tried to think of something to say, some clever remark to break the tension, but the words didn't come. Clara, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. She worked with a steady rhythm, her movements fluid and purposeful. She had a quiet confidence about her that Sam found both impressive and intimidating. He realized, for the first time, that Clara didn't need his help or approval. She didn't need anyone's help. She was perfectly capable on her own. As the afternoon wore on, the two of them continued to work together. Sam was used to people doing what he said, used to having things go his way. But here, with Clara, it was different. She wasn't trying to impress him or make him feel comfortable. She wasn't trying to charm him, nor did she care about his money or his status. She simply existed in the world in a way that Sam had never encountered before. Eventually, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Clara stopped working and wiped her brow with the back of her hand. She looked over at Sam, who was still standing there, unsure of what to do next. "You know, you don't have to keep pretending," Clara said, her voice low but steady. "I know why you're here." Sam's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea how Clara knew about the bet. He hadn't told her. And yet, somehow, she seemed to understand. "I don't know what you mean," Sam replied, trying to sound casual, but his voice betrayed him. Clara gave him a knowing look. "You don't have to pretend to be interested in me. I'm not some prize to be won, Sam." For a moment, Sam didn't know how to respond. He had never been spoken to like this before. No one had ever called him out on his actions so directly, so honestly. But Clara wasn't just calling him out, she was challenging him, forcing him to confront the truth. "I didn't mean for it to be like that," Sam said, his voice softer than usual. "I thought it was just a bet, but now, I'm not so sure anymore." Clara studied him for a moment, then nodded as if she had been waiting for him to admit that. "I figured as much. But now you know. There's more to people than just games and bets. If you want to know me, you'll have to do it the hard way." Sam didn't know what to say. He had come here with the intention of winning, of playing a game he had always excelled at, but Clara had just shown him a different way to look at the world. One that didn't revolve around winning or losing. It was about something deeper, something more meaningful. Sam couldn't explain it, but he felt the shift inside him. Clara had taken him by surprise, and in doing so, she had unknowingly forced him to confront parts of himself he had never considered before. As Sam left her farm that evening, the sun sinking low in the sky, he realized that this was no longer just about a bet. It was about something far more complicated and far more real. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't know if he was ready for what lay ahead. Over the next few days, Sam found himself caught in a whirlwind of confusion and self-reflection. Clara Mulligan had done something he hadn't expected. Instead of bowing to his charm and submitting to the games he had always played with women, she had flipped the script entirely. She had called him out on his true intentions, and Sam couldn't shake the feeling that, for the first time in his life, he had been the one who had been outplayed. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Clara wasn't trying to outplay him at all. She had simply been herself, honest, strong, and unaffected by the things that most people, including Sam, held dear. It was on the third day after their encounter that Sam found himself riding out to Clara's farm again. This time with no pretense. There were no more bets to win, no more dares to conquer. The simple truth was that he wanted to see her again. The thought of her lingered in his mind like a quiet song he couldn't stop humming. He had tried to distract himself with his usual routine, checking on the cattle, overseeing the ranch hands, dealing with business, but nothing seemed to hold his attention in the same way. Clara had become a quiet presence in his thoughts, something that was always there, even when he tried to push it aside. The ride out to her farm felt different this time. There was no arrogance in his steps, no plan in his mind. Just a feeling that he needed to see her, needed to understand her more. He didn't know what would happen once he got there, but he knew that this time, it wasn't about winning. It was about something else, something real. When he reached the edge of her property, he saw her out in the field, as usual, tending to her animals. She was bent over, fixing a broken fence post, her sleeves rolled up and the sun casting a golden glow on her hair. She looked like she had been working for hours, her movements purposeful and steady. Sam hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should approach. He didn't want to disturb her, but at the same time, he couldn't turn back. Clara heard the sound of his horse's hooves before she saw him. Without looking up, she straightened her back, wiped her brow with the back of her hand, and then turned to face him. Her gaze was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if she knew exactly why he was here, even though Sam still wasn't sure himself. "Sam," Clara said, her voice steady but not unkind. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Sam dismounted from his horse and walked toward her, the dirt beneath his boots crunching with each step. "I wanted to come by," he said, trying to sound casual, but the words felt heavier than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day." Clara didn't say anything at first. She simply nodded, as if she had expected this. "I figured you would," she said, her voice quiet. "I've always known that people like you don't just walk away from things easily." Sam was taken aback by her insight. He had expected a conversation, maybe even an argument. But Clara wasn't offering either. She wasn't making it difficult for him to speak. She wasn't pushing him to explain himself. She was simply letting him figure things out on his own. And in that silence, Sam realized something important. Clara didn't need his approval. She wasn't looking for anything from him, and that was both freeing and frustrating at the same time. "I don't know what I expected when I first came out here," Sam continued. his voice more thoughtful now. "I thought I could just do what I always do, you know? Show up, be charming, make my move, and win." Clara turned back to the fence post she was fixing and tightened the rope she had been securing earlier. "You've been playing games your whole life, haven't you?" she asked, her voice low but matter-of-fact. "With people, with land, with everything." Sam shifted uncomfortably. There was no judgment in her tone, just an observation. But it made him feel exposed. "I've always done what I had to do to get ahead," he admitted. "I didn't think too much about the rest of it." Clara gave him a small nod. "That's the way it is for a lot of people. You get used to the game, and you don't realize it's a game until you're deep into it." Sam watched her work for a moment, unsure of how to continue. He could feel the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so much of his life thinking that winning was everything. He had convinced himself that being the best, the wealthiest, and the most powerful was the ultimate goal. But here, standing on Clara's farm, it felt like that all meant nothing. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I want to understand you, Clara," he said, his voice softer now. "I want to know more than just what people say about you in town. I want to know who you really are." Clara paused, her hands still on the fence, and then she turned to face him fully. She studied him for a moment, as though deciding whether or not to say something. Finally, she spoke. "I'm not interested in games, Sam," she said firmly. "I'm not interested in being part of some wager or challenge. I've spent too many years building my life from the ground up, alone. I've had to be strong for myself. I've learned to live with myself, even when it's hard. I don't need anyone's approval, especially not from someone who thinks they can just come in and win me over." The sharpness of her words stung, but Sam didn't flinch. For the first time, he understood what she was saying. Clara wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was simply telling him the truth, and that truth made Sam realize how much he had taken for granted in his life. He had always assumed that he could win people over with his wealth, his charm, or his status. But Clara had shown him that there was so much more to a person than those superficial things. "I'm sorry," Sam said, the words feeling heavier than he had expected. "I didn't mean to treat you like a challenge. Or a bet. I came here with that intention. And I was wrong. I can see that now." Clara's expression softened a little, but she didn't let him off the hook easily. "You're lucky that you're realizing this now," she said, "because a lot of people never do. They go their whole lives thinking that the game is everything. And they miss out on what really matters. They miss out on the people who are worth knowing." Sam stood there in silence, absorbing her words. For a long time, he had been caught in a cycle of thinking that he needed to win, to always come out on top. But Clara had shown him something different. She had shown him that there was more to life than that. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sam said after a long pause. "But I want you to know that I'm not the same man I was when I came out here. You've made me see things differently." Quote, Clara looked at him for a moment, and then gave him a small nod. "I can't promise you anything, Sam," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I can tell you this. You've got a lot of work to do, both with yourself and with the world around you." Sam nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if Clara would ever be interested in him, beyond what had happened between them. But for the first time, that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had learned something real. Something that he could carry with him long after he left Clara's farm. As he turned to leave, Sam felt lighter. The sun was setting behind him, casting a warm glow over the land. He had come to Clara's farm looking to win, to conquer. But instead, he had found something far more valuable: peace. The game had ended, and for the first time in his life, Sam didn't need to win anymore. The days following Sam's visit to Clara's farm felt different, as if the world itself had shifted in some small but undeniable way. He couldn't quite explain it, but Sam found himself thinking about Clara far more often than he had expected. It wasn't the challenge of winning her over that lingered in his mind anymore. It wasn't the bet that had brought him out here in the first place. It was her. It was the way she had spoken to him that day, straightforward, honest, and unafraid to call him out on his actions. Clara had taken him by surprise. And for the first time, Sam realized that he didn't need to always be the one in control. But even with this realization, Sam couldn't deny the small voice in the back of his mind that wondered if he could still somehow make things right. He had messed up. No question about it. His intentions had been selfish, his actions careless, and yet, the more time he spent reflecting on their conversations, the more he realized that Clara wasn't the kind of person who would hold his past against him. She wasn't looking for apologies, but for sincerity. Clara, however, wasn't one to make things easy for anyone. She had worked hard to build a life for herself, a life where she didn't depend on anyone, especially not a man who saw her as a conquest. The moment she had seen through Sam's bravado, she had stepped away, not out of anger, but out of a quiet resolve. It was a lesson she had learned long ago. The people who truly mattered didn't need to be convinced of her worth. And yet, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't done enough to prove that he wasn't like the other men who had come and gone from her life. He had made a promise to himself that he would not only fix his past mistakes but also show Clara that he could be someone worthy of her trust. But how? What could he possibly do to make up for the way he had first approached her? As if she were nothing more than a bet to be won. As the days turned into weeks, Sam found himself riding out to Clara's farm almost every day. Not with the intention of winning her over, but because he genuinely wanted to understand her better. He had nothing to prove to anyone but himself. His conversations with Clara were no longer about small talk or superficial gestures. Instead, they began to dig deeper into their pasts, into their fears and hopes for the future. One afternoon, as Sam arrived at the farm, Clara was out in the field again, this time inspecting the crops she had planted. She seemed completely at ease, moving with the rhythm of the land, as though she was in perfect harmony with everything around her. Sam had come to admire this about her, the way she wasn't bound by time or expectations. She simply existed in the moment, content with her life and the hard work that came with it. Clara looked up as he approached, but she didn't stop what she was doing. "You're here early today," she said, her tone casual but with a hint of something else beneath it. Sam smiled, but it wasn't his usual confident grin. It was more like an attempt at sincerity, something he hadn't given much of in his life. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, trying to find the right words. "I realize now that I came out here for all the wrong reasons, but I also think I've learned something." Clara stopped what she was doing and finally turned to face him. "What do you mean?" she asked, her expression neutral, though her eyes were sharp, watching him closely. "I've learned that there's more to life than just winning," Sam said, his voice soft. "I've spent so much time focusing on the game, on how to come out on top, that I never stopped to think about what really matters. And the truth is, I don't want to be that guy anymore. I don't want to just chase after things to prove that I can win. I want to understand people, truly understand them." Clara didn't say anything for a moment. She simply looked at him, her gaze steady and thoughtful. Sam could feel the weight of her silence, and it made him uncomfortable in a way he hadn't expected. After a long pause, Clara spoke. "You're not the first man to come out here with a promise to change," she said quietly. "But you're the first one who's admitted it. That's something, at least." Sam swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. He had hoped that his words would carry more weight, but he knew that it would take more than a few sentences to make up for the mistakes he had made. "I don't expect anything from you, Clara," he said, his voice more earnest now. "I know I can't undo the past. But I do want to show you that I'm serious. I'm willing to put in the work. Not for a bet or a game, but because I think you deserve better than that." Clara regarded him for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she turned and began walking back toward the barn. Sam hesitated for a moment, unsure of what she was thinking. But then she stopped and looked back at him. "Follow me," she said, her voice calm. Sam didn't hesitate. He followed her into the barn, where Clara had been busy preparing for the next harvest. The barn was well organized, everything in its place. Just like Clara's life. She wasn't someone who wasted time on things that didn't matter. Everything she did had purpose. "I've been doing this on my own for a long time," Clara said, stopping to face him. "I've built this farm, this life, all by myself. And I know it's not easy, but that's the way I want it. I don't need anyone to fix anything for me." Sam nodded. "I understand that. I respect that. But I also know that you can't do everything alone forever." Clara met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to just let anyone in." Sam felt a pang of disappointment. But it didn't hurt the way it once would have. He wasn't looking for an easy solution anymore. He wasn't asking for her to change her life for him. He had learned that sometimes, the best way to earn someone's trust was to simply be patient, to respect their boundaries, and to show that you were willing to stand by them, even if they didn't need you to. For the next few weeks, Sam continued to visit Clara's farm. He didn't push. He didn't try to impress her. He simply worked alongside her, learning about her life and the farm she had built with her own 2 hands. He helped where he could, but more than anything, he listened. He listened to the stories she told, the lessons she shared, and the way she spoke about the world. One afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set, Clara stopped what she was doing and turned to Sam. "You've changed," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I can see that." Sam looked at her, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady, "but I think the real change came when I realized that I wasn't trying to win anything anymore. Not from you. Not from anyone." Clara's lips curled into a small smile. It wasn't much, but to Sam, it felt like the world. He didn't know what would happen between them. He didn't know if Clara would ever fully let her guard down. But Sam had come to realize that it didn't matter. He had learned something far more valuable than winning. He had learned that sometimes, just being there for someone, without expectations, was enough. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the land in soft shades of orange and purple, Sam realized that, for the first time, he was exactly where he was supposed to be.